Now I can see everybody. That's good. I'm waiting to make sure that we have gone live. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Thank you again for taking the time to set up and do this virtually. Hopefully, with the news from the governor, we're working our way back to some sense of normalcy, whatever that normalcy is going to be. I'd like to welcome you guys and welcome those folks that are going to be watching us, I guess, through YouTube. As we, this isn't a regular meeting. This is a meeting for us to specifically talk about our budget as we go for the next year. So what I'd like to do is turn my screen a little bit here and ask Vice Chairman Bowers if he'd open us with an invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Our dear Lord, gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight with thanks, Lord. Thank you for all the many blessings you bestowed upon us, Lord. Thank you for the grace and mercy that you shared that we didn't deserve. We thank you for all the things that you've done in our community and the way it has come together and worked together through some serious adverse times in recent days, Lord. We pray that you be with all those affected by the tornadoes here at home and our neighbors in Seneca and our neighbors throughout the state, Lord. We pray that you be with the frontline workers that are dealing with the COVID-19 crisis, God, and we just pray that you continue to guide us through this, Lord. Lord, we pray that you be with us tonight as we discuss the budget of the county, that you give us wisdom and discernment where it's needed, God. We love you. We thank you for all that you have done and all that you're going to do through us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to allow you, if you don't mind, just to lead the pledge since you're there.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I appreciate y'all doing that. It's a little awkward with it being, there's enough of a little delay from when we talk, but again, thank you for doing this. And at this time, I'll turn it over to our acting administrator, Mr. Roper, to get us started.
Thank you, gentlemen. I want to make sure everyone can hear me fine.
Yes.
Okay, good. Tonight's the first chance you will all have to really dive into the budget. And so as we've traditionally done, we start with our finance director, Mr. Garino, giving an overview. I'll tell you that this process has changed a little bit this year in the sense of we had COVID-19 intervene right when we were in it. I think I communicated that in the transmittal letter to the budget to you just here a couple of weeks back. But so just in the interest of time, I'll turn it over to Finance Director Garino and let him start his presentation.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Council. Thought it'd be appropriate. And let me just start by saying, I emailed everybody out this PowerPoint presentation about 5:30, so you have it in a PDF format. If you can't see it up on the screen, since you're sharing other cameras, but hopefully you have that, or hopefully you can see it on the screen where I'm sharing it with everybody, and hopefully everybody on YouTube can also see it. But I just want to start out with this cover sheet. I always try to put a picture of the county. This year, I thought it'd be appropriate to put, since we've got a formal set of goals out there, to put what our goals are out there. And council a while back approved 6 goals for for administrator and staff to look at. And I thought we'd highlight goal number 1, which is maintain a conservative budget, since that's why we're here tonight. You had also listed out objectives for each one of the goals. So I thought I'd start out by just on the ones for the budget, not go through all of them, but the ones for the budget is just go through those objectives to how we can meet our goal. One of the objectives was analyzed based on a millage, which I think as we go through this presentation, you'll be able to see that we've done that. Zero-based budgeting was number 2. We've always done a zero-based budgeting. Staff starts out, in essence, with a blank sheet of paper. We kind of copy the previous year's budget, but we go through and Ken has seen this without a doubt when he's gone through it really for the first time. We go through literally line item by line item. We make departments break down what's in the budget within each account line item, and we review those things. So in essence, we do a zero-based budgeting every year, and we've done that since 2000 when I came up here. The next one is mandatory versus discretionary spending. We looked at that when we were going through the budget. I think you'll find during the budget, everything that's in here is pretty much mandatory. There's going to be a lot of requests that was out there, and we'll go through the numbers, but there was a lot of requests out there by departments, outside agencies, elected officials. But unfortunately, we can't meet everybody's expectations with the amount of revenue that we have. No tax increase unless tied to an overriding need. When we looked at our needs, there's a lot out there, but there was nothing in there that we felt was compelling enough to raise taxes. So I'll go ahead and say, and I'll talk about a little bit later on, there is no tax increase for any millage that we have out there. That's for the fire districts, that's for county operations, that's for the library. And I may be leaving off one, debt service. There's no tax increase or fee increases in this budget. So I just want to emphasize that. Employee incentive program. I know HR is working on that with the administrator. I know they started with recognizing employees back in January, having employee of the month. And I know they're working on the program to incentivize employees to come up with ways that they see that we can save money. And if we can, we'll reward them with that. Recognize increase in operational expenses. We'll talk about that in the budget. We've had some increases in operational expenses, i.e. solid waste with the C&D transfer station, and then bringing on full-time the detention center. But we'll talk about that as I go through. And then finally, reduce healthcare costs through self-insured options. I haven't been directly involved in that, but I know HR and our risk manager and our broker are working together to try to find ways that we can go self-insured. I know that's been a goal of council for a couple of years. And I know that's a goal of staff too, is to see if that's really attainable as something we can do down the road. So that's the 7 goals that are objectives that council outlined for their number one goal. And hopefully we're touching on that in the budget for the most part. I just want to go through and remind council, I'm sure you're all familiar with all these goals, and I won't go through 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 because they'll be talked about at later times. But when we put this budget together, we put a lot of emphasis on goal number 1, which is maintain a conservative budget. And I think you'll see that throughout the process. All right, duties of administrator. I started this last year going through what are the duties of the administrator. There's a lot out there, but I wanted to highlight word for word what is that law for the administrator do in relation to the budget. So I'm going to read it for those that can't see it, they're only listening on YouTube. Section 4-9-640, preparation and submission of budget and descriptive statement. The county administrator shall prepare the proposed operating and capital budgets and submit them to the council at such time as the council determines. At the time of submitting the proposed budget, the county administrator shall submit to the council a statement describing the important features of the proposed budgets, including all sources of anticipated revenue of the county government and the amount of tax revenue required to meet the financial requirements of the county. I want to highlight 2 things in there. One is proposed. This is only a proposal from the administrator. It's no different than departments that submit a proposal on what they need for the following year's budget. This is not locked in stone what we're presenting. Obviously, ultimate decision is up to county council. You can do it 1 of 3 readings. We've already had 1 reading. We can do it at the next meeting, which is 2nd reading, or we can do it at 3rd reading with a majority vote of council. Important features. That's the budget presentation. Obviously, we're not going through line item and looking at every single expenditure, but we're putting this presentation together to highlight the important features of the proposed budget, along with the anticipated revenues and the amount of millage required and other revenues to balance the budget. So I just want to highlight the duties of the administrator and make people understand this is not a final budget. Council can change it any way they want to. They can add to it, they can leave it alone, or they can reduce the budget, however they see fit. I just want to touch on that so everybody's familiar. What are the duties of the administrator when it comes to the budget? Just kind of want to go and give an overview of what we'll talk about throughout this highlight. We'll talk about the budget calendar, total budget for all funds, financial highlights of the overall budget, highlights of the general fund, other funds, talk a little bit about capital, talk about the debt service fund, and then we'll go over the millage rates. And let me just make clear if I haven't, this is a Q&A, so don't feel like you have to wait to the end of the presentation if you've got a question. This is y'all's budget. I'm opening it up. If y'all want to stop me at any time and ask any questions, that's fine. And I just want to make that point out there. Budget calendar. This is the calendar council approved back in, I believe, early January. January 10th, we sent out the budget packages to the elected officials, department heads, fire districts for them to put their budget together. They had until January 31st to submit those budgets. Staff took a little bit of time to put the budgets together in a readable format and have it in our system. And then the month of February, each department had the opportunity to meet with the administrator. So whoever wanted to meet with the administrator, they could set up a meeting. And I think actually Jessica was the one that initiated that to set up times with everybody. Ken can talk on it if he wants to, but I think it was very enlightening for him to go through probably 30, 35 different meetings with departments. And I think he did a very good job of really listening to what departments' needs are. He also listened to a lot of wants, and he had to decipher between the needs and the wants. Obviously, with the same amount of revenue or thereabouts that we've had, he wasn't able to give everybody what they needed. And he definitely wasn't able to give anybody what they wanted. You'll see in a little bit how much we had revenues versus what was requested. And you'll see that not everybody's going to be happy with the budget, but in the end, we have a balanced budget with no tax increase. April 6th, we gave the budget book to council for first reading. I think everybody's picked up their budget book. And they also has some supplemental information that I put to the left of the book also that was not in the book itself for the public, but it was just some stuff that they've asked for on the side to be able to review. April through June, county council budget work sessions. Obviously, that's where we are right now, having our first work session. Obviously, we can have as many as council desires. We're willing to be here for to help council make their final decisions on what needs to be in the budget. May, the plan was to have second reading and public hearing of the budget ordinance. I think that's slightly changed. My understanding that's going to be April 27th for second reading and public hearing. And then the plan was for June to have third reading and adoption of budget. That also could change with everything going on with the COVID-19 situation. And then hopefully if everything's approved by June 30th, we'll begin our new fiscal year with the implementation of the adopted budget. I just want to kind of give you an overview of the budget calendar, and we're on track right now. We have April, May, and June to keep working on the budget and have budget work sessions if council chooses to do so. All right, going to the total budget for all funds. Now, this is all funds. This isn't just the general fund. This is going to be your library. This is going to be your fire districts. This is going to be your debt. Anything outside of that, Tri-County Tech. Trying to go through the list real quick. But overall, our budget for 2021 was approximately 72 million compared to 70.5. And then I'll list out the different type of categories. You have personnel services, which is the main category, operating, capital, and debt service. If you notice, they all relatively stay the same except for capital. And we'll talk about it a little bit later on, but I just want to point that number jumps up from 4.8 million to 6.7 million. And that's for an FAA grant that we have that's going to basically pay us about 95% between the federal and the state for a project out at the airport. I think it's a crossover ramp project that y'all may be familiar with. So when you look at that, our overall budget increased 1.8%. If you take out the airport project out of capital and you compare it to last year's budget or the current year budget that we're in, it's a decrease of 2.6%. So that's a decrease of 2.6 instead of an increase of 1.8%, because that one big project for the FAA grant is about $3.2 million. So that kind of sways the number when you include that in the total budget. If you're to take out all of capital and only look at personnel, operating, and debt service and compare it to 2020, we would have a 1% decrease without any capital. So my point being is we've maintained a conservative budget. Obviously, it went up 1.8%, but that is for a one-time capital expenditure. But anyway, just wanted to point out that overall we've gone very conservative, and we actually would have a decrease if we didn't have that one project out there, but we didn't want to give up the opportunity to possibly get $3.1 million from FAA for about a $3.3 million project. We're getting basically 95 cents on the dollar, which is hard to pass up. Expenditures by type. This is just categorized a little bit differently, as I talked about earlier, or just a few seconds ago, put in a graph format. 57% of our budget is personnel services. That's salaries, that's overtime, that's health insurance, that's workers' comp, it's dental insurance, but 57% of our budget goes to personnel. Another 28% goes to operating cost, and then about 10%, a little less than that, is capital. And then debt service is a little bit about 5%. So you can see in a kind of a graph format where our costs go for the overall budget of the county, including all funds. If you look in the general fund, personnel services is about 72% of the budget. So you can see the jump from the overall budget for all funds versus just the general fund when it relates to personnel services. Expenditures by function overall out of the $72 million, you can go through and see the pie chart. I won't read off every one of them, but you got public safety is 40% of our overall budget. So about $28 million of our budget goes to public safety, which is your sheriff's department, your detention center, it's your fire departments, it's your EMS, it's your coroner's office. 40% of the budget goes towards public safety. Then you have public works is about 14%. And then you got health and welfare, cultural rec, you can kind of go around it. And then you have general government, which is basically your court system. And then just our kind of indirect cost at your treasurer's office, at your assessor's office, finance, HR, and so forth. So that's about 18% of the budget. So sometimes pie charts, people can see it a little bit differently when you break it out with a pie chart or some type of graph. Revenues by function, and this is overall funds. So you've got taxes at about 59%, that's our highest one. That's property taxes, that's vehicle taxes, that's local option sales taxes, and so forth. And then you have licensing, permits, and fees. That's going to be your fire fees, that's going to be your 911 fees, that's going to be building codes, and then your franchise fees. Intergovernmental, for the most part, is going to be your local government fund. It's not all of it, but the majority of the intergovernmental is the local government fund, which is about $5 million for next year. Charges for services is about 15%, and that's tied to your EMS fees, your solid waste fees, your ROD fees, your airport fees that we charge, and then your Mile Creek Park fees that we have out there. And then you can see the other ones that even though it's a part of the budget, it's not a significant number when it comes to your fines and forfeitures or your investment income, and then rent and contributions. Again, we have no tax increase, no fee increase. Basically, the revenues are pretty much flat. We had talked about possibly with the fire fees, because I think council's talked about this in the past, about having some form of consistency with our fire fees throughout the 13 fire districts. We started working on that. We were going to try to tackle commercial fire fees and have a uniform plan. But then once we got thinking about it with everything going on with the COVID, we kind of backtracked on that and said we really need to put this on the back burner and talk about it probably in the fall time, separate from the budget. So we don't really get distracted too much from looking at fire fees in the budget versus on a separate meeting. So we may come back around in the fall or maybe in the late fall and talk about how we can be more consistent on our commercial fire fees, and then maybe eventually be consistent on our residential fire fees. But I think that's another discussion for another day. Financial highlights for overall. As I've mentioned, we do have a balanced budget for 2021. We will have to use a little bit of fund balance in different funds for some one-time costs, and that is in your left-hand book. I listed out what's going to be taken out of fund balance, and you have it by fund and what the actual item is for. As I've said a couple times, we have no tax or no fee increases, and that's something we're very proud about, and especially in light of everything that's going on with the whole economy of the county. As I talked about before, and I was going to get to, total request, everything the department's requested, outside agencies requested, we're short of revenues about $25 million. So we had to do a lot of cutting. Here again, you're probably going to have people that's not happy with their budget. You may have elected officials come up to you to talk about the budget. They have not seen what's in the budget yet. We have not given them access back to the software to be able to see what's in the budget. We have not given them any reports. We will give that to them in time, but we wanted y'all to have time to go through the book, be able to ask any questions before you're hit with any questions, maybe on the street or phone calls or anything like that. So here again, you may get some phone calls once they see what their budget is going to be. I don't know that anybody's going to be happy with their budget at all, but I think they're going to understand the situation and understand that we could only do so much with this budget. You shouldn't hear from any department heads. If you do, that's something that the administrator can address with that department head. As far as positions, you also have a listing in your book on the side. I gave you a listing of every position that was requested, from what department, the type of position, whether it's full-time, part-time, the amount that it would cost to do that, and then what we're recommending. So there was 31 new positions requested, along with reclassifications at a request of about $2 million. Now, if you look, that was $1,964,353. If you have that sheet beside you, we're actually recommending $62,854, which is for one full-time position to be added to the budget, and then increase the hours for the Veterans Affairs director from 20 hours to 29 hours. And I think she came and spoke to you guys last year about that, and was not included in the last year's budget, or should I say the current year budget. So we've only added one position out of all the positions that were requested and reclasses that were requested. But you can see people feel like they need more people, and maybe they do, but at this time, we just couldn't justify any new positions for 2021. Capital, you also have a capital sheet in there, and we'll talk about capital a little bit later on, but you have a sheet in there for capital. List every capital item that was requested by the department, what the item was, what was actually requested, and the amount that was requested. So there's $20.3 million of new capital requested, 6.8 million was recommended. But you have that sheet, and I've told departments, council will be aware of everything you requested when it comes to personnel and when it comes to capital. So they'll understand what you believe your needs are. And we'll talk about that in a little bit when it relates to capital down the road. There is a 3% COLA adjustment for all employees. This is something when we were putting the budget together, COVID hadn't really hit as hard as it hits now. It's something we still feel needs to be in the budget. If you look back in 2017, there was no COLA adjustment, 18, no COLA, in 18 and 19, there was no COLA adjustment. There was some one-time funding for the employees. 2020, we gave a 2% COLA, which is the year that we're currently in. And our concern is before COVID happened, we were getting behind on employee pay. We put in the comp study in 2017. That was not something that made employees wealthy whatsoever. It was a comparison study with other counties and cities in our area. One of the things that they talked about in that comp study is keeping up with inflation. So we've gotten behind. I think council has seen that with the detention officers, where we weren't able to hire detention officers. We've had a lot of other positions that are out there that we haven't been able to be filled because of the pay, in my opinion, hasn't been attractive. But in light of everything that's come up since then, We're not going to implement this until we know the economy's back on track again. We're not going to implement this necessarily July 1st. We'll look to see how our revenues are coming out to make sure they're in line with what we projected. We'll look at the unemployment rate to make sure everything's coming back on track. We do believe this is, especially I believe, this is the greatest economy in the world. We will rebound from this. And I just don't want us to forget when the economy recovers and everything's quasi back to normal, that we forget about the employees. So we will have this on hold until we feel better about the economy and we feel better about how our revenues are coming in. But we just didn't want to take that out at this time until we have more information. No increase for medical, property and liability, and workers' comp.
Hey, Ralph,
Yes.
can I interrupt?
Sure.
On your 3% COLA, you say you're not going to implement that. The economy gets, how's that going to, I mean, how are you figuring that? Are you figuring it's going to be a 3% increase starting July 1st, and then we're not going to start pay? I mean, how are we going to decide when to decide we're going to pay employees extra money?
Well, the budget has in it for a 3% starting July 1st. So we've got that in there. But at this point, Ken and I talked about it, and we just feel more comfortable that we defer implementing this until we see that revenues are coming in like they should. We may not be able to implement it until, August, September, October.
Okay, I agree with that assessment because there's a boatload of people that don't have any job right now. But I guess the point is there's kind of a trigger you have. Like if we started this in September, we back pay through June, or will we just start in September?
Start
you
in
see
September.
What I'm saying?
Yeah, you'd have to start in September. Our system isn't sophisticated enough. It's a very good software, but it wouldn't be sophisticated enough, to my knowledge, to be able to go retroactive and pay employees when you consider overtime and everything else. But the point would be I'm sorry, I heard a little bit of echo.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, the point would be is if we implement in July 1st, September 1st, for an example, the money would be there for the 2022 budget. We wouldn't have to come up with additional money.
Right, but we'd end up with a little bit of overage because it didn't start until September.
Correct.
Okay.
But we wouldn't have to worry about it for 2022 either.
So how are we going to decide when to implement that, if we're going to implement that?
I think we just need to get a better feel for how the revenues are coming in. I mean, I was on a conference call with SCAC for administrators and finance directors about a week and a half ago. Even the director of the economic advisors, I apologize, I forget his name. He didn't even know how the revenues were going to come out. No one really knows where we're going with the economy.
I get that, and I agree that there's very uncertainty as how this economy gets restarted. The question I have is, whose decision is it to whether to implement this or not? If we put in the budget, but just allocate it, but don't actually implement it, who's responsible for implementing it under what conditions? You know what I'm saying, Ken?
Yeah, I do, and I want to make sure you can hear, because it's a good question. And what my first instinct would be, y'all provide for it in the budget. And so me and Ralph have that available, but we would have to keep you updated. Like, okay, this was in the budget, but we're not implementing for this reason. This was in the budget, but we're not implementing for this other reason. So we would have to keep you updated as we move forward. And it may well be at one point, we felt like we needed to come back to you for, our feelings on it. And it may be that at some point y'all said, you know what? You're being too conservative. We need to implement it. So I think it'll be a continuing conversation as we move into the fall, and we just got to bring you good data.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm getting at, is I think it's going to have to be a conversation between council and the administration on this, because if this economy does not come back as quickly as we're hoping it will, I think the damage from this thing will be much larger than people economically realize. The company, the business is a lot of business, that the revenue will not be there for the counties. And I don't want to be promising that's not, because suddenly we're projecting it and it falls flat on its face.
Totally agree with you, Trey. And that's one of our goals. That's one of the objectives is maintain a conservative budget. I think you've known me after working for the county for 20 years. I'm very conservative in what we do, and we're not going to go out on a limb and do something. And let me point out too, and I may have forgot to mention on capital, but I was going to get to it later on the presentation. Capital goes along the same way too. Not everybody's going to be able to have access to their capital accounts July 1st. We'll probably implement it, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, for stuff that's truly needed. It's all needed, but stuff that really can't wait. We've got some fire trucks in there. If you've looked on that sheet, we'll probably go ahead and do that because they have enough to pay for it in their operational cost or their operational revenues. And those are some of the stuff that is really needed. But all the other capital, we're going to have to tell departments you're going to have to hold on for a little while before you start buying your capital. But hopefully that gives you some reassurance on where we're going with it. It's not going to be a knee-jerk reaction. It's, we think the employment's come down to 8%, so we can give everybody a COLA raise. We've got to see it where we're on track with. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree. And that is a concern of mine is that we don't, it seems like the only people that aren't affected by the COVID-19 are the government. Everybody else is affected. And those are the people that actually fund the government. And so if we make predictions on what we think is going to come in revenue and those businesses don't recover,
right,
then you get a problem with your budget. And
right.
So I think we have stuff in there. I think we need to be real cautious about what we're going to spend until we know this economy is back in shape. And that might not be till December or January, honestly.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. My point being is putting that in there, and I'm optimistic on the economy. As I said, I think it's the greatest economy in the world. When it does come back around, and I know it's going to come back around, the question is when. I just don't want us to lose sight of our employees.
Okay.
We've got employees out there, and I won't say much, but we've got a lot of public safety employees out there right now. I had to use them last week, and I don't know that you really appreciate them until you really need them. And I can say that from my standpoint. When I really needed EMS last week, they were there for me, very professional. And I just don't want to lose sight of that when this economy rebounds. So
one of the things we could do if the economy stays weak for a while, we could give a bonus at the end of the year. The economy comes back and really booms at the end of the year. We could give bonuses to workers.
yeah, and I thought about that, Mr. Feamsley, too. I mean, we have done that in the past to give a one-time pay, and that's what we did in 2018 and 2019, gave one-time pay increase. So there's options on the table.
Vice Chairman Bowers.
If I could, the problem with the one time is what we talked about last year that got us to do the 2.5 or whatever. It does nothing for that base. I understand the point in the settlement, but I think that you're right, Mr. Greeno. The economy will bounce back. I think you're right, Mr. Whitehurst. It's going to take some time. The question is when, not if, but when. And that's one reason why we got to be careful. And I get that. Something we all have to consider, though, is just because the economy is bad, state retirement system is still going to go up. The employee contribution is going to go up, as well as the employer contribution is going to go up, unless the state decides to suspend their formula for increasing. Is that 3%? What is it going up? 1.5%?
It goes up 1% on the employer side, I think through 2022.
What about on the employee side?
That was capped at 9% and I think it's 9.75% for police or PORS retirement 2 years ago.
So they've already hit there. It won't go up on them again?
Not in the current plan, no. I mean, everything's subject to change, but that was capped about 2 years ago. I think it's 9 for regular employees, and then public safety type positions is 9.75.
I don't know why I thought they went up until they hit the cap. It wasn't all at once. That's
it was in stages. Yeah, it was in stages when they initially did this. I think it was 1% on both sides. Then it stopped for the employer. The employee, excuse me. But it kept going on the employer, and I think that's through 2022. I don't have that information right in front of me.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought they still were going up, but if
Yeah,
they
on the
don't, that's
employer
great.
side. Yeah.
Mr. Bowers brings up a good point, is that is another 1.5% increase on our side.
Yes. And we've got that
Our-
accounted for in the 2021 budget.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, please
Think you're
do.
good.
I'm here to answer any questions that I can. Going to the general fund, we'll start getting into the individual funds. Couple highlights in the budget itself. We've looked at the attorney's position that was in there, and I know Ken is on the acting side of it, but we've taken that position and basically put it back to a contractual basis and created an executive secretary with part of that funding. We also have funding in there, about 50,000 for any contractual needs that we have for an attorney. This is one thing that was requested and we talked about back in the fall with the public defender. He had brought it up. What we want to do, because right now they're running basically 2 sets of books. And it would be, I think, more advantageous to everybody from a day-to-day operation standpoint is if we transfer all the positions and operating costs to the public defender's office, and then we just allocate 1/12 of the budget. So those 4 employees that are county employees now, they would become approximately July 1st, they would become public defenders of the Greenville, I guess you would say the Greenville District Public Defender's Office. And we would just basically give them 1/12 of their current budget. There's no increase in the budget for the Public Defender's Office. We'll just take the current year budget, give them 1/12 on a monthly basis. So they only have to run one set of books. Right now, they're having to run one under our system. And then for their employees under the Greenville system, they have to run their operations under another set of books. So this just creates more consistency. And I think it's a little bit easier on everybody.
Yeah, I have a question too, but Vice Chairman Bowers.
My question, by them staying on our payroll, do we control raises, anything like that? Or my fear is if we say they're all yours, and we're just gonna pay you 1/12. How do we keep that 1/12 in line?
Because whatever is approved in the budget, and I don't have that number in front of me, we're just going to give them 1/12 of that amount. So they'll be, if they want to get pay raises, they're not coming back to get any more money from us unless it's through the budget process with council approving it. If their health insurance costs go up, they've got to pay for it within that current budget that they have. And I don't want to flip through pages right now, but they'll have to stay within the current budget.
So that
It really
1/12,
helps. Go ahead.
that 1/12 is it 1/12 of our budget or 1/12 of their budget? 1/12 of whose budget?
It's 1/12 of our budget that we're currently giving to them. They just have to run everything, their employees and their operational costs through our books and run everything through our financial system. They get payroll checks from us. In essence, they're still going to get the same amount of budget. We're not going to give it to them lump sum July 1st for how much money it is. We'll just give them 1/12 of it every month, same way that we're doing Haygood Mill.
So what does that do to their insurance and things like that?
Well, it freezes it for us, but it's up to them to find out where they're going to get the additional money to pay for those costs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, really, in essence, and it's not why we were proposing it, but one of the benefits to us is you've got to stay within that budget. If we were to give a 3% cost of living raise, their employees won't get that. It'll be up to the public defender's office on how they want to allocate that money to their employees. They're only going to get X number of dollars.
So aren't we but isn't this going to create more problems though? I mean, for those people?
Well, there'll be Greenville County employees. They're currently under the public defender's authority now. We can't really do much to them. All we really have the ability to do is pay for their employees. This just freezes our cost until we determine that we want to give them additional money. It's same thing with Haygood Mill. You know, we're giving them $134,000 a year. If their cost increase for whatever reason, they're only going to get $134,000 from us per year. They'll have to figure out how to cut cost, increase revenue, or whatever it may be.
And Ralph, I think, Ralph, it's important to point out here that this was a request that came from the public defender's office because, and the public defender came and met with us. They've transitioned over the last 2 or 3 years to a circuit system like the solicitor's office works on. So Greenville and Pickens are together the way they are with the solicitor's office. The solicitor, Chris Scalzo, the public defender, Chris Scalzo over there in Greenville, who's in charge of both offices, I think it was wearing on him to run 2 sets of books. And he just sees the efficiency and the best interest of his office to combine them, run them all through Greenville County. And we just fund the flat amount that y'all approve from year to year.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes, my question is this. Mr. Guarino mentioned Hagan Mill at $134,000. We know that Hagan Mill is a true gem in our county, and it's very valuable to our county and to our citizens, and also tourism dollars and things like that. $134,000, that place has taken a hit this year. Their hands have been tied with COVID-19. Is there a chance, what is it we can do to help allow more funding for Hagan Mill to help them? Because we got to keep that place. We got to help them out a little bit. What can we do? Is there anything there that we can give those folks at Hagan Mill to help them out?
Council, that's second reading, third reading. If you want to allocate more money, we'll have to come up with a plan where to cut from. It's, as I've said, we had $25 million more of requests than we have revenues for. We'll just have to cut somewhere else if council decides, a majority of council decides that they want to allocate more money to a department or an outside agency.
Vice Chairman Bowers.
So I don't know if this is the time, if we want to let Mr. Guarino go on through this list or not. I think Councilman Hendricks does bring up a great point. I don't know Hagan Mill specific, diving into the details of that, but I do think we need to have some conversation about our small businesses and all those that have been affected by COVID, looking at things we can do. Again, I don't know if this is the time for that conversation or if you want to let Mr. Guarino continue and then try to get into that.
Mr. Bowers or Councilman Chair Costner, can I
Yes.
comment on what Mr. Bowers is saying? I agree with what he's saying as well. And Mr. Roper, have you or can you look at some possible ways to come up with something to help our local businesses, the mom and pops, that their hands, again, like Hagan Mill, their hands have been tied with COVID-19? Are there some things that we can do to help them with incentive packages or something? Mr. Roper, can you look at something for that? Have you been looking at it, or can you do something in regards to that?
And Councilman Hendricks and Vice Chair Bowers, I will tell you that I appreciate your comments. It's something that we have started looking at on a staff level. I reached out to several different department heads and asked them, like, how are you interacting where we could make, some investments in our small business and our local economy. And we're going to come up with that. And I appreciate y'all being receptive to that idea and thinking along similar lines that we were here as a staff. So we're going to come up with a plan, kind of a cafeteria list is what I've called it, that we're going to give you as council, if you'd like to hear it at the May meeting, of a wide-ranging group of incentives, both economic development, things that we can do at planning, things that we can do at tourism, things that we can do in our purchasing department, things that we can do workforce development. We've looked at several different areas and we're kind of perfecting that plan to give to you. So I appreciate that y'all are interested in receiving it. I'll give you a low-hanging fruit that we actually just went ahead and did today because it was related to the emergency, and that is building code fees and permit fees for houses that were destroyed in the recent tornado. I went ahead and just instructed planning to waive those fees. So because if people are rebuilding, we need to work with them. Also instructed them to expedite the process to work with those people. So there's going to be some things that I can do, but there's going to be some things I need to bring to y'all and have y'all select which ones you think are the best. But we definitely need y'all to consider, and I'm glad you're receptive to some economic stimulus on a county level.
Councilman Whitehurst, I know you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, is to your point, Mr. Hendricks, about helping out with Hagan Mill until they can present us a real professional P&L statement. and get their ducks in a row, they're not going to get any help, at least from my point of view. As far as the county, the best thing we can do for small business is get off their backs. I think the idea of getting rid of these permits and stuff for these houses is a help, but I think, you know, it's across the board. I don't think we need to take government money and pick and choose who's going to be the winners and losers. I think the best thing we can do is get out of the way and stop being an obstacle. I'm not saying that we are, but I think that's the best thing to do, is to get out of the way of business instead of, you know, saying, well, let's just take money from one person and give it to another. And I don't agree with that, but that's kind of a general statement.
Yeah, and I think, if I could interject, Mr. Chairman, Councilman Whitehurst's point is well made, in the sense that what I would love to do is give y'all, like I said, a cafeteria plan, a series of different avenues, and then y'all make the policy decision on what type of incentive, what type of innovation can we do to help the local economy. But I see it as my job to give you a whole series of options, and then y'all are the policymakers.
Vice Chairman Bowers.
Yeah, and I want to, just for clarity's sake, Councilman Whitehurst, I agree with you 100%. I'm not about just giving money here and there, but I like the idea of enticing local business. I'm all about building local business. If we can do something locally that currently we maybe aren't, it may cost us $1 or $2 more to buy it here in Pickens County than, say, getting it from China. Those are the kinds of things that I would love for us to look at.
Councilman Hendricks.
Yes, sir. Going back to Councilman Whitehurst's comments about Hagan Mill presenting a readable ducks in a row statement. Chairman Costner, is it possible for us to get those folks on the agenda for maybe May to come in and have a presentation, if I can get with them and see what they can do to present something to our satisfaction that's showing that how things are going, how things are looking, so we can help them out? Is it possible to just get
it's possible for for any I've let you guys know that anytime you want something on the agenda, that's not a problem. Councilman Whitehurst.
I'm not going to be subject to that same little presentation we got for 30 minutes on little pictures of buildings. Until they get with Ralph, put together a proper P&L, I don't want to see the council to waste our time, period.
I understand what you're saying, but let's give them a chance if we can.
We've given them 2 chances, and both times they have failed to produce a proper P&L statement about what they're doing. What we got was a dog and pony show last time, and personally, I was offended by it. It was just a big smoke and mirrors type of thing, and I don't want to go through that again, to spend 30 or 40 minutes talking about this, that, and the other. I want to see their numbers, and I want to see real numbers. And until they meet with Ralph and figure out how to put that thing together properly and show it to us properly, we can't make an intelligent decision on what to do with them.
Well, and I will say that, Mr. Roper, I appreciate you talking about having a cafeteria style look at some of these other options as far as possibilities. Councilman Hendricks, I do like the idea of, anybody that wants to come and talk about, or you want to put it on the agenda, I'm fine with that. And Councilman Whitehurst, I will agree with you. We've really got to have something that's a real P&L statement to where it makes sense financially from what we're looking at, because we're charged with being as frugal as we possibly can be with regards to the budget. One thing that I do want to point out to you guys is that when you look at the percentage of money that we allocate in our budget to everything, and when you look at the 6 pillars, and we're way ahead this is more of a conversation for later, but I'm just going to make this quick statement, Ralph, and then let you continue on. When you look at, we're talking about broadening economic development and developing a comprehensive tourism approach, those 2 items right there are a small percentage. We don't put our money towards those 2 of those pillars that are a part of our 6 pillars of what we're trying to do. So as we begin to look at that cafeteria style that Mr. Roper was talking about, I would like to look at where are we spending our money? Do we need to have something with small business? And economic development that way? Do we need to look at where we're spending our money on tourism? You know, when we look at, we have it broken out by department for Hagen Mill, for Mile Creek, for the museum, yet the Performing Arts Center isn't on there. It's lumped into tourism. And when you look at what's allocated for tourism, that means that the Performing Arts Center is going to get really the small end of the stick. So those are just some things that I think we need to take a look at. But rather than continue on the conversation, Mr. Greeno, can you keep moving forward with your presentation?
Yes, sir. I'll be glad to. Next item is upgrade Register of Deeds current servers. You know, it's not a big thing, but our current servers won't support the new software that we have to go to. The software that we currently have, there will be no cost for it. The software company is providing the upgrade for free, but our current servers don't have the capacity for the new software. So that's one thing that's in there. Kind of one of the highlights. There's not a lot in this budget to talk about, but I thought I'd throw that out there. We need to transfer a position from 911 to building codes. In the past, they've been able to support their operations with the fees that they generate and the recovery costs that we get from the state. This year, we're not able to because landline revenues are going down. So we're having to transfer a position that really is building codes or for building codes. We're transferring it from 911 to help that fund out into the building codes, which is in the general fund. That's one item. Information system, another thing, we got to upgrade our servers for our mail server and our financial system software. We're going to have to go through a major upgrade on our financial software, which encompasses not just financials, but public works, HR, purchasing, other type things, and our current servers won't support it. So that's kind of a item that I thought I'd throw out there that's in the budget. Sheriff's Office, they had a lot of requests, but the only thing that we've really included in there is additional operational costs for the new detention center. And that's really for utility cost. The electricity, I think we're averaging, it's about, and I haven't got all the numbers, but what I've seen on the bills, it's increased by about $10,000 a month once we opened up the detention center. You also have insurance on that. And then our medical and food costs are going up for inflation. So I know that's kind of a big number, but it's something we just didn't have numbers when we were putting the 2020 budget together. We have a lot better numbers now. So we've increased our budget by that for those type of expenditures. As I said at the beginning, it's done with no tax increase or no fee increases. So we put that budget, put those operational costs in there. Roads and bridges, we had to move a stormwater position over to roads and bridges, and we created the public works director position. I think Ken made council aware of that previously, but they were already behind on a lot of stuff for roads and bridges from an engineering standpoint, along with C funds that we needed. We needed to quote another engineering position over there, and luckily we had someone in stormwater that could help out with that already had their engineering degree. So we've moved them over to roads and bridges.
Mr. Greeno, let me interrupt you. Councilman Whitehurst, you had a question.
Okay.
With the sheriff's office, I would like a complete breakdown of these additional food costs and the utilities costs. It's supposed to be a high efficiency building. I know what we had in the other building wasn't as efficient as this, and $10,000 a month increase on utilities is a lot. I want to hold this sheriff feet to the fire on this. We got a $200,000 increase out of budget. I want to make that up during this budget that we had to throw into last year because he did not include it in his budget when he figured the cost for his detention people he was supposed to have trained by March. So I want a very exact breakdown of these operational cost of food and all this type of stuff I want to see it from the people that are sending this bill. I want real tight numbers on this sheriff's budget.
Okay. I'm making a note right now.
Do we know the number of inmates that we have in our facility right now? I'm just curious.
I don't know the exact number. I know that last week they had a special term of court to get 30 people out, but I don't know the up-to-date number as of now. They're not at capacity or anything like that. I know that we've still got some room.
Okay.
I'm going to move to the next slide.
Can I go? Can I ask some more questions?
Sure.
When we what do we spend blockade right now, the stockade for utilities?
The old stockade?
Yeah.
Well, remember we merged the prison with the sheriff's department. I think it was in probably the current year budget. So we're really not, to my knowledge, spending anything out there.
So we're actually picking up on that side because there's nothing being used.
Right.
So my question is, once again, why have this big increase?
We're going from and this isn't just, the whole sheriff's department wasn't just the detention center. We went from a 93 bed facility to what, a 400 bed facility approximately.
Well, we combine facilities into one.
Right, but it's a lot bigger building compared to what we have. But I'll be glad to get you copies of bills or the general ledger on the operational expenses, and I'll be glad to get that to the administrator, and he can disperse it to council.
Just because the electric bills are up, don't mean he's trying to run things efficiently.
Right.
I want to ask Mr. Roper a question. Executive Secretary, explain to me.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll tell you, when in the previous administrator, Mr. Wilson operated with a kind of part-time secretary that he shared, and then I provided a lot of administrative support to him. So then after he left, I moved into the acting administrator role. I need somebody to provide that administrative support to me. And that's been somebody I didn't, I moved an employee over from the Register of Deeds office because I knew she had those good organizational skills. So she's been integral with what we've done so far. I think it's actually a net savings, when we take away the attorney salary and instead go with an administrative support person. And she's been very, very helpful.
What you're telling me is we're going to use the attorney now as a contractual thing on a need basis, like we did several years ago.
That's right. And I think one way to think about that, if I could offer this, is that when Gerald Wilson was the Public Works Director, he moved up to the administrator role. He didn't really need a day-to-day Public Works Director. Mm-hmm. He could handle that. Well, when I moved into the acting administrator role, I don't have to forget the law I know. So day-to-day, we're okay. What I need is some administrative support. Okay. So that's the way that's been working. It's actually been working very well, but I can certainly understand the question because of, it's different than what we've been doing.
And that's okay, because you're right, you bring it with you. And if as long as we can keep the costs down so that we don't end up, like you say, if we can come up with a net savings and it gives you the support you need on what you need support on, you don't need so much support on the legal side, you need support on the administrative side. And
that's right.
As long as if we don't need that attorney all the time, but just when we need them, then that makes sense.
That's right.
So that position's being terminated and made into a contractual position, which would be a 1099 position.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
And just maybe I can answer the question real quick if you can bear with me. I was trying to look it up. I know in the budget on page 61, you'll see the attorney's budget was 208,142, and we have $50,000 in there for 2021. So that's a decrease of $158,000. I was trying to pull up, I don't have it with me real quick, but I'm sure we include the executive secretary's pay and benefits. It's way lower than $158,000. If that helps you with some information. I just don't have that real quick, salaries and benefits. All right, I'm gonna move forward if no one else has any more questions. All right, solid waste, increased operational costs for the new transfer station for the C&D. It's costing us about $514,000. That's a partial 3/4 of a year funding, because it's our understanding that is going to go into operation if we're on the projected timeline of October 1st. but that's a lot more fuel that we're going to have to do. Insurance, well, I wouldn't say insurance, but there's a couple other items that we're going to have for additional cost. The actual, like I said, fuel cost along with the fees that we have to pay Greenville County now makes up that cost right there. We'll have to pick up the other 1/3 or 1/4 of the cost in the 2022 budget when we have a full year. But that's also included with no tax increase, no fee increase for anything. EMS, I think we talked about this a while back when we kind of talked about where we're going with the budget. EMS overtime, it's pretty high. So one of the things that was requested by the EMS director and the emergency service director was to increase the part-time employees' hourly rate by $2.75 to get us comparable. Wouldn't say we're even, but get us comparable with our part-time employees, pay them a little bit higher rate to start working with Pickens County to make it an incentive for them. Because right now we're paying a lot of overtime to our full-time employees. And I gave an example today to the administrator on what a couple of EMS employees are working. And that's just costing us time and a half when it can be done for the regular pay rate. So
Vice Chairman Bowers wants to interrupt for just a second, Mr. Greeno.
Okay.
Yep. Just for clarity, the part-time staff, their limit on the number of hours they can work.
That's correct. And to be considered part-time, it's 29 hours per week is what we consider part-time. Now they could here and there, and that's more of an HR director's, I don't want to get in her lane. They could work a little bit more here and there, but I think they look at look over a certain period of time to see how many hours they've worked over that period versus saying you can only stay within 29 hours per week. But hopefully this is going to reduce our overtime. And I know we talked about this with council at a previous work session about how much we're paying in overtime. So hopefully this is going to help out. And we'll just have to see. We'll have to get the EMS director to make sure he's managing the overtime, because it will be a tight budget to stay within a $200,000 decrease. All right, next item is add one full-time position at Mile Creek Park for the new cabins. I talked about that earlier about new positions. We added on, I think it was 10 cabins, but we haven't given them any more operational costs to manage those cabins.
Ralph, I hate to interrupt, but I would say also there, just to expound on that slide, that we added 10 new cabins and 2 new parks.
Correct.
So there's also those 2 new parks that need programming and service and maintenance. And so we're looking at somebody that can flex in those different areas.
Yeah. And I think, Ken, as you and I talked about, is we're kind of, shifting the thought process on tourism. Even though this position will be, and along with the other positions may be in a certain department, they're still under the umbrella of tourism. So if someone's needed for something going on at the PAC, then we're going to have to pull resources if it's under their scope of work that they can go help out on different areas. And I think that's what you alluded to, that this position won't necessarily be 100% at Mile Creek Park, but they may have to go to the new park that's open down on, I think it's 12 Mile River.
That's right.
Vice Chairman Bowers.
So should this position be listed under Mile Creek Park, or should this position be listed under, I forgot the title of the position that's in the old registration / emergency management office?
Oh, you're talking about the person that does code enforcement, the litter control /
No. The nice lady we met at our last live in-person council meeting.
Beautification thing?
No. Who does Mr. Merck answer to?
Who's Mr. Merck? He answers to Allison Fowler. Her position is the tourism director, Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Director position, which was already existing. That was Jay Pitt's old position.
Correct.
So she's in that one.
So my question is, if this person is a float person and not a Mile Creek Park person, is that where the position needs to go in the pecking order? Because we just talked about we're moving a position from E911 to building codes because the person's really been working for building codes for years, blah, 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 blah. Clean accounting. Is that not where this position needs to be?
Well, and I think from my standpoint, and I'll let Ralph weigh in a little bit more, but from my standpoint, that's not as big of a determination as y'all might see it. Already we have an existing situation where if we need somebody at the museum, we supplement with somebody from the PRT main office. If we've got somebody from the museum that's got extra capacity, we can supplement them at the Performing Arts Center. So it's something I've been stressing with them all along is I want them to be nimble and I want them to be available to any parks, recreation, and tourism venues. So where our hope is, and I guess in a way, and I don't want to sound flippant, but it doesn't matter to me where this employee is staged within the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Division. They're all going to be nimble and having to respond to different needs.
I think the primary function will be Mile Creek Park, but I mean, I think that's really up to the PRT director to decide where people are allocated at. We already have one position that's coming out of, quote, the tourism department that's in the general fund. Allison is coming out of the local accommodations fund, but we have another person, and I apologize for not knowing her last name, but her first name is Miranda, that's in that position to promote tourism around the county. But I kind of agree with Ken. It's not necessarily where we put it at. We put it at Mile Creek Park because that's where the primary function is going to be at. But also, as Ken mentioned, we got to be nimble to be able to move these positions around as needed.
I get that, but 2 years from now, when we say Mile Creek, we need you to tighten it up because you were at a profit, now you're at a loss. That's kind of skewing the numbers today for 2 years from now.
Well, and I'll weigh in and say this. I don't think you want to diminish the expertise that's required for Mile Creek or for somebody at the museum or somebody at the Performing Arts Center. I understand having different people that can do different functions and being nimble. And I do believe that we should do that across the board. That's why this, I think this organization with a government organization can run efficiently when people can work in different areas. But also, you can't just say, hey, you work out at Mile Creek, so go run sound at the Performing Arts Center, or at the Performing Arts Center, you need to go help with this museum piece that we're setting up when they don't know when the knowledge isn't there. So I think we need to be careful not to just blanket it. Oh, well, it's marketing. Oh, well, it's tourism. And I think that's the part of the problem that we've had is that we haven't looked for the expertise and those people that are the best in their fields within those different areas.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I do want to brag a minute. Some of you may or may not know this. Mr. Roper shared with me, I don't remember if it was last week or week before, but since everybody's quarantined, they've been cleaning out their yards and their garages and their houses and their attics. And our landfill, our transfer stations have been recycle centers, have been seeing all kind of volume. And I want to understand Roads and Bridges has stepped up and helped drive trucks because those guys have CDLs and can do it. That's efficient government.
That's cool.
That's exactly right. We've found some efficiencies, and actually y'all used that phrase before I thought of it. We found some efficiencies in some ways that we can backstop each other within department, beyond departments. And that's been one of the things we're learning as we come out of this. Now, to go to the chairman's point, we've still got to have people that are competent to run the jobs that we need run. So, the CDL, we had CDLs, they're just driving different trucks. So that was a one-to-one. There's going to be things that won't be one-to-one, and we've got to look at as far as the Performing Arts Center goes, for example, we've got to be able to have people that can do a portion of it, and then we've got to look at how we can get the foundation to integrate us with people that can, be artistic and run a soundboard. So we've got to look at both balancing and being nimble, which is one of my watchwords here at the county. And then on the other hand, having the right experts. And I appreciate the chairman's comment there.
Mr. Guarino.
Okay, follow up on one thing I was calculating real quick. Say we're saving between on the attorney's position, going back to contractual and including the executive secretary, taking all that into account, we're saving about $106,000, just to answer the previous question on that. So when you take into account what we were paying under the attorney, what we're keeping in there, the $50,000 plus the cost of the executive secretary with benefits, we're saving a little over $100,000. All right, I'll move on from there. Talked about a little bit earlier before, and y'all talked to the Veterans Affairs Director last year. We've increased the hours for the part-time Veterans Affairs Director from, I think it's 20 hours to 29 hours. Weren't able to do that in the current year budget, but we wanted to get that done for the 2021 budget. So that money is in there. Soil and water conservation, we increased it from $3,000 to about $23,000 for operational cost. Haygood Mill requested $221,150, but kept it at the same funding level, which I believe is about $134,000. So we didn't increase it. We didn't increase it either. In contingency, we had $25,000 in there. A lot of things pop up, especially with what's going on right now. So we increased that from $25,000 to $50,000. Request made by mental health and health clinic was $20,000, but we were not able to fund in either one of those operations for 2021. But you may get phone calls from those organizations, and we just want to make you aware of it. Same thing with Haygood Mill. You may get some phone calls asking why we didn't get additional funding. Again, I go back to goal number one, maintain a conservative budget. There's not a lot of extra money in this budget at all. We had to make some decisions, what we thought was in the best interest of the county as a whole. So here again, just want to make you aware of it. Now I'll move on to other funds. Like I said, y'all can stop me at any time. Tri-County Tech, I know y'all generally meet with them every year, but everything's going on with the COVID-19. I'm not sure what the plan is on that, but the numbers I got from their finance director, they're increasing it by about $19,000, and that was all just due from what they told me was utility cost. As you know, we're using fund balance to make up the difference between taxes and what they're requesting. What I calculate is we'll have enough in fund balance at the trajectory we're going at to fund their operations through fiscal year 2024. Then we'll have to.
White, excuse me, Mr. Guarino,
Sure.
Councilman Whitehurst.
You know, when we got this package sold to us about Tri-County Technical College, when we just paid that huge amount of money for that building, told that the increase would not go up at all for any of these extra expenses for that we pay for utilities and stuff, that this was not going to affect that, that we would be fine. And now they're going up. I have a question to them.
I lost you.
Hold on a second, Mr.
They told us.
Mr. Whitehurst, say that again because we lost your last statement.
I don't have great internet connection here. When we were originally getting this proposal, we were told that the costs and all this stuff was not going to go up, that we were actually going to save money here. There wouldn't be any increase, because that was the big question, as you remember, when we forked out $7 million to them, that the cost would go up to us for all these increased because of this new bill. And we were told, no, these efficiencies coming in here will not go up in cost. But now we're seeing almost $1,000 per year.
Okay, we got everything but your last sentence.
Why
We got
is that? We were told one thing, something else.
So yeah, Mr. Guarino, do you know why? I mean,
I can give that to the administrator on what they submitted, because I told them I needed it for the budget. I'm not sure where the direction is going with meeting with them this year. I know they have an annual meeting where they meet with council and y'all can ask questions. And just like with other departments, utility costs do go up, but we can ask that question to them in more detail if council wants to find out what utility costs are going up.
yeah, please. And I know Vice Chairman Bowers wanted to say something.
I want to go back to what Councilman Whitehurst said when we were talking about the jail a moment ago, when costs went up. First off, I do agree. We talked about the fact that more efficient should be a savings to the college. We won't see an increase because they saw our numbers and what we were working with and thought it was a reasonable, feasible plan. And I thought we were all on the same page there. I do think we need some explanation of, I mean, because if this isn't a one time, this is $20,000 extra a year that you're going to have to come up with. I'm with you, Councilman Whitehurst.
All right, I'm making a note.
Thank you, Mr. Guarino.
Okay, fixed nuclear fund, we get money from Duke. It's about $90,000 a year. Same operational cost, no change on that. Library fund, feasibility study of expansion for space at the Easley Library. This is something that the library director, who's new, that's just been here a couple months, she sees an opportunity to do something a little bit different with the extra space that we have at the Easley Library. And I'm going to let Ken, if he doesn't mind, probably expand on that just a little bit on what the plan is for 2021 and potentially after that.
Yeah, so one thing, Miss Howard came in with a good deal of experience running a library system down in Georgia, in Rabun County, I believe, Georgia. And she came in, had a good, strong background here. She's a Pickens County native. But when she got in, she looked at those two big, empty, unfinished areas in the upper floor on that top floor. And I think I showed some of y'all those spaces. They were roughed in pretty well when the building was built initially. And then over time, the library has built in its capital reserve. I think, and Ralph could give you this exact number, but I think it's $3.5 million. So she looked at that, and she looked at what she thought the long-term mission of the library was, and she said, we're not using reference librarians as much because people carry a reference library around in their hand. It's called Google. So she said, we're not using them as much. And she said, we've got this space here and we've got money in the bank. What if I told you that we could set this up in these two locations as a conference center where we could have conferences here? She said, I feel like I could get state library folks to come to a conference here. She said, how could we leverage Operation Dragonfly to see if we could have veterans groups come and meet in a conference center there? How could we leverage the Big League World Series and have, maybe umpires or coaches clinics come into a conference center there? And so she said, I've got the money on hand and I can do it with the existing staff I have. What she's asking for in this budget is just having someone come in and say, okay, what would a budget be to finish those two spaces? So it's kind of just a feasibility first step to see if her idea has merit. She's got the money to pay for it already in the bank. She just needs us to sign off on that.
Yeah, their fund balance for at the end of 2019 was about $2.5 million.
Councilman
I added
Whitehurst.
$1 million.
Councilman Whitehurst, I think I know what you're going to ask, but go ahead.
One of the things we looked at was potentially putting the Pickens County Museum in that space. And I know we've kind of talked about it in general senses because I think it would certainly offer the opportunity for more people to see what's in that museum. And I'm not saying that I'm against the conference center. I think that's not a bad idea at all. But I think there's several options. We ought to look at that space and say, what can we do with that best serves the citizens of this county? And I'm not saying one's better than the other. I know it's something we talked about, and we haven't gone down that road too far yet. But we're not getting the traffic at that little museum in Pickens, and I don't think that it's being very well shown out to get a lot of people there, I guess.
Wouldn't the feasibility study, though, Mr. Roper, give us that? I mean, would they look at all options?
Well, we could probably task them, that we're going to be on the very front end of this, so we could probably task them on looking at it. I would, and so, I'll pass that back to the library and also here internally for the things we can directly control, because I do remember that conversation. But I would also say, and this is something we've been working on here the last few months, having the library, the museum put things in the library already, put some of their holdings in the library so people can view them. Have the museum put things in the Performing Arts Center. We actually moved 2 display cases down there to the Performing Arts Center for that purpose. So you're right to identify that museums, particularly our museum, it doesn't work the way that I think was probably originally envisioned. And we need to have more conversations about how to fix that.
Councilman Hendricks.
Yes, sir. In regard to the museum and Mr. Roper and the education, me being a special education teacher at Pickens High School for 26 years, as a matter of fact, that if there's a way, and Councilman Whitehurst talked about foot traffic, things like that. But get our schools more involved, for the museum director to get our schools more involved, to bring more foot traffic into the county museum, because that is a gem of our community, and we need to make sure that that thing is flourishing and we keep the doors open for our museum. It's very important for the history and culture of our area. So is there a way to utilize some of that when times get better with COVID-19?
Yeah, there may be, and I'll give you a good example of that. Probably the most successful thing that our museum does now has been stopped by COVID-19, and it's unfortunate. But the times that we drive the most traffic into our museum is with the homeschool days. It's where, we have a significant number of people in the county that are homeschooled, and then they have educational events at the museum. If we could think about that as a template, we might can drive that traffic that Mr. Whitehurst is talking about.
Vice Chairman Bowers.
About the museum, I do want to say, I think that Daniel was actually gaining some traffic. We had a discussion in my family just over the weekend about the student art gallery thing. My nephew actually had a piece. He's in elementary school, had a piece. The whole family was planning to go do, which was bringing people in. And the question is, are they going to reschedule it? COVID-19, who knows what's going to happen. But I know that was throughout the county. It was every age group had different times and days. So he was doing things. You were talking about the homeschool group, but even with the public school group, he was doing things to try to drive traffic. It is definitely not, you're correct, the museum of today. It's like the library, the reference library of today. I can get on and look at aquariums and museums all over the world from my telephone. It's not the same as it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. But I do believe Daniel was making some headway pre-COVID. If I could, Mr. Garino, go back to the library for a moment, though. Looking at their revenues on taxes, just because I'm curious, they had a pretty good jump from 2018 to 19. Budgeted in 2020 was less than 19's actual. Do we have any idea where they're going to come in actual for 2020?
Last time I looked, they're in line. I mean, I'm waiting for all the numbers to post, but I don't see that they're going to be below budget.
Well, I'm actually curious because in 19 their actual was 3.343,
Right.
and then in 2020 we budgeted 3.319, but then 2021 we've got them at 3.435, which is significant over 20s, but 20s was significantly lower than, well, not significantly. Was lower than 19, and I get that. I'm just curious if we have any idea. Are they going to be closer to that 3.4 number than the 3.3 number?
I would say they're going to be closer to the 3.4 number from what I'm seeing. And this is, as y'all know how the taxes work, it's really an estimate at a certain point in time of what we have as value and what we project that we're going to have value for the following year. The day we put those numbers in there, everything can change. Now, will it change significantly? Probably not, but it's based on the numbers we get from the tax assessor. People can change throughout the year and go from 6% to 4%, 4% to 6%. It just really fluctuates, but all in all, as a percentage, we generally come in around, I'd say 99 to a little bit over 100, 102%. Of what we had planned on budgeting. So it's pretty close. It's not a exact science to it. But I agree, and it goes back to number one on our goals, which is maintain a conservative budget. That's one way we've been able to save money over the year to do possible projects like what they're talking about with a feasibility study. I was trying to look online real quick to see if I could see where they're at, but generally, we come in pretty close on revenues when it comes to taxes for, and general fund can be a little bit different because we have local option sales tax that we have to take into account. But I would say that everything I'm seeing is we're in line with about $3.4 million and based on what we've budgeted.
Thank you.
One of the things that I'm really interested in is space for meetings in the Clemson area. We had to look till we finally found a place for the Clemson Lions Club to move to their meeting. And there's only about 25 people in our Lions Club. Yet you look at places like restaurants, they don't have large meeting spaces at all.
Thank you, Mr. Feemster.
And if I could just look something up to answer Chris's question, the 3.3 million, we're currently at 97.77% of the budget, which we still have vehicle taxes to come in. The majority of our taxes have already came in, but we will have some delinquent tax bills that still come in. So that kind of goes back to what I talked about is 3.3, we're probably going to come in at 3.3 and have no reason to believe that we won't hit 3.4 in 2021. And these are based all on the estimates that we're getting from the auditor's office and the assessor's office on what we have on the books. But if I had to guess for 2021 for now, it probably could come in a little bit higher. If you look at 2019 and 2018, we came in at 104 and 102% respectively of that year's budget. So does that help out, Chris?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Victim services funds, no change in that. 911 fund, I talked briefly about that as far as moving the position. It's still going to be a tight budget throughout the following years, but we were able to balance the budget for 2021.
Okay, Vice Chairman Bowers.
Sorry, question. So I see that you said you were moving a position.
Mhm.
In 18-19, we had 4 full-time. 19-20, we had 4 full-time. 2021, we're recommending 4 full-time. But we removed a position?
Thank you for catching that. I'll make that 3 in the budget. Yeah, that's an oversight on my part, and I apologize.
I mean, if not, we're going to be giving some pay cuts, and nobody's going to be happy about that.
Yeah, if you notice on the personnel services, it's gone from 270,068 down to 201,166.
Yeah, and the money, where it matters is there, but their actual count is wrong.
Yeah, no, I truly appreciate you catching that. I've gone over this budget and looked at this document, I don't know how many times, and it seems like as soon as you publish it, you start finding an error here and there. So I'll make that and update it for the final budget, but I appreciate you catching that. All right, 911 funds, state accommodations tax, we really don't know how much money is going to come in with that. That's one of those unknowns, but it's all based on a formula on how much we can allocate for the 30% money, how much we can allocate for the 65% that goes to outside agencies, and then what we have to transfer to the general fund. So at this point, we don't know, but we'll go with what we have. We don't have anything specific we're planning on, because that's something the committee has to recommend to council to decide how they want to allocate the money. The tourism fund, that's the thing where we ran out of money for Haygood Mill. There's just a little bit of money that was left over at the end of 2019, and they've collected a little bit of money off fees at the museum. So we're just going to use the remaining funds for museum expenditures. I think it's $4,500 approximately. So there's really not a lot of change in that. Local accommodation fee, I think council knows how that works. Half of it can go to operational costs from the previous year's revenue, and then the other half has to go to capital type expenditures. So I think one of the things that they want to do at Mile Creek Park for capital, a lot of trees were damaged around the cabins at Mile Creek Park. They just want to go back and replace those trees that were damaged. Obviously, this is probably going to be one of those items that we put on hold until we see, because this is tied to beds and heads, that we'll put on hold until we see how the revenues are coming in from the local accommodations fee. The prison fund, not a lot of money in that. I think they get money from commissary fees that are out there, or telephone fees that they charge out there. That's under the jurisdiction of the sheriff by state law. Here again, I think it's $2,400 a year that they collect off those fees, and then they spend it on miscellaneous items for the jail. Road maintenance fee, obviously we're not going up on any fees, changing anything with that. So whatever money's left over, we'll use that for paving. And then we have 2 projects to replace some arch culverts at Rocky Bottom Road and Silver Creek Road. Our public works director, he knows way more than I do about this, but I think we're still having problems at Silver Creek where we're getting some flooding. So they want to put in a new arch culvert that's larger. So it'll hopefully take care of any flooding that's currently going on.
Is any of this from the flooding that we incurred this year? Or is this something ongoing?
No, this is more ongoing issues that we're trying to clean up. The Rocky Bottom Road and Silver Creek, both of those have been kind of continuous issues, and we're just finally coming up with, this is the solution.
Okay, so it's not, I was curious as to the, any funds that we got from the government on.
This won't be connected to that, although we will have some funds that we're applying for in that area, but not on this.
Okay.
Recreation fund, no change in that. It'll be the same, pretty much the same allocation that we've done in the past. Pickens Alliance Fund, no change on that. Really didn't increase or decrease. I think I should probably point out, didn't put that in there, but if you recall, we added a third position. I think it was in August of 2017, I believe it was, where we added another position with half the funding coming from the county, half the funding from the school district. That was on a 2-year pilot program, which once we hired the position, it actually comes up for reconsideration April of this year. But we do have funding in the budget for 2021 if council wants to keep that position. And my understanding is the school district is going to continue to pay for their half of that position. So I just wanted to point that out.
Vice Chairman Bowers.
So, Mr. Administrator, sir, Mr. Chairman, sir, I think before we re-up this position, while I think it's a valuable position, the idea behind the position when it was pitched was a valuable position. I don't know that we've seen any evaluation on the position, impact locally on the position. This is the great time. We're talking about small businesses and local businesses, and whether it be Abbott Industries, who's doing wonderful things during all this, or whether it be Reliable, who's still making sprinklers and, whatever. But we have a lot of mom and pops out there too during all this. And but what I understand, this position was supposed to be out in the field, really keeping their finger on the pulse of economic development, which small businesses are the #1 industry in South Carolina, according to Secretary Hitt. This is the opportune time for that person to be out and about. Have we evaluated? Do we have a tool to do that? Is there a mechanism that you two gentlemen see that we need to do that?
Mr. Roper?
No, I would say that I have not evaluated that employee. Mr. Farley is not available here these next couple of days. He's taking some annual leave back home, but I will follow up with him when he returns to get that information back to y'all. To also look at some metrics, because that's without getting employee specific, I would be interested in the metrics just like you are. How is this helping small business? How is this helping the school and the county recruit, maintain, and make small business flourish? So I would like to see that as well.
Councilman Whitehurst, you had a question.
I totally agree with Mr. Bowers on this. It's not only just evaluating the employee, but was the particular position working? Was it doing what it's supposed to do? And is it making enough value to just fundament on it? I think it's an opportunity for government to actually look at a program that works before we just start throwing more money at it.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. What it's supposed to do, not only did the person do a good job, but did it do what it's supposed to do?
Yeah, and I do want to say that I may have said employee. We do need to evaluate our employees. Every employer, with right person, right spot. I meant the position as a whole, the idea of the position, what we're actually funding.
Yeah, and I'm making notes on that too. Thank you.
Councilman Hendricks, you had something you want to say?
One thing about that position, if I'm not mistaken, what that guy does is he works with students and businesses to help with their internships and things like that. And also, when you talk about the pulse within the business world about some of the things that they're needing that the Career Center can do to help with these particular businesses in placing our students. our Pickens County students in these businesses. There are quite a few of our students have been placed and hired right out of high school. Some of them hired before they even graduate to work in some of these businesses throughout our county through this position. But I agree with you guys. Yes, we need to evaluate it. There needs to be a measuring stick on performance within that position. No questions or doubts with that whatsoever in my mind with that. But one thing, do keep that in mind, that there is some benefit with that as far as helping our citizens become employed within these businesses.
Well, I agree with you, Councilman Hendricks, but I do see the point for sure from Councilman Whitehurst and Vice Chairman Bowers in the sense that you're just telling me about it and we're just talking about it. We haven't really seen any of the metrics around how that position has worked and to what benefit it has for the small businesses, for the schools. We can say that it was great, but show me. So let's get Mr. Farley or Mr. Roper, if you'll take care of getting that information to us.
And I'm not questioning that at all. We need to have
Right.
that evaluation. I'm not questioning it one bit.
Mr. Greeno?
Okay, moving on to fire districts. As I talked before, there's no fee increases that include fire districts. We may need to talk about that down the road if we want to get a uniformity, which I think was one of the goals that council had outside of the budget, but get us some uniformity on how we do our commercial and residential fees. As you can probably see in our ordinance, it's in the budget book. It's all over the place on how much we charge per square footage for commercial and then how much we charge for residential. But there is no fire increase. We're not changing anything for 2021. If council wants to change that down the road, we can always look at doing something a little bit different to have more uniformity in the budget. There is a request, and we'll talk about a little bit more in the capital, but we're looking to give a loan to the 6 Mile Fire Department and the Dacusville Fire Department for some fire trucks, and then having to issue a GEO bond for capital for the vineyards. I heard council loud and clear last year, they would prefer not to issue GEO bonds when we don't have to for the fire districts. In this case, that's what our plan is like we've done in the past for some of the buildings. We would loan them the money and then they would pay us back over time over a fixed rate based on what the current rates are over a certain period of time. So that's what's in the budget. We'll get to more specifically the actual capital items when we get to the capital section. The GEO bond for capital for the Vineyards Fire Department, we have to issue a GEO bond because they don't have enough money in their operational budget to pay it back to the county from a loan from the county. So they would have to issue what's called a GEO bond, because remember we have Act 388 and you can only raise their millage because they're under a millage system.
Hold on a second, Mr. Greeno. Have we lost Councilman Hendricks? Councilman Hendricks. All right, so let's let him reestablish. If you'll wait just a second.
Did we lose Mr. Feemster? I've got him.
I'm here.
Okay, I just didn't see your face, sorry.
You can slide the whole thing to
Okay.
the left, you can get everybody.
Okay.
But we've lost Councilman Hendricks.
Can I just make a comment, Ralph? We have to approve that GEO bond, correct?
Yes, you will. Yeah,
So
we'll
they'll
have to do 3 readings,
that
public
first
hearing.
thing. Right, they got to present it to us and why they're going to do it and all that kind of stuff.
Nice, Mr. Can we, and Councilman Myers, please don't get upset, Mr. Greeno, Mr. Chairman, until we get Councilman Hendricks back, can we stop conversation about
Right,
this?
yeah, we need to, just so that everybody can hear everything.
Yeah.
Everybody.
some beach somewhere.
Y'all need some more music? I can provide music. Y'all need some more music? No. Fine.
I was saying that if you played music, we haven't paid royalties, so they'll stop us.
Wait a minute. It's on my Pandora, doesn't that count?
No, it's going out on YouTube, man. Going on YouTube.
Man, I don't know if I have enough bandwidth to do this.
I'll take Queen and Freddie Mercury.
Oh my goodness! Now we completely lost our meeting.
I'm old school.
Does Wes not own a plug?
Is he there? But just
His phone has
Oh,
died, and he doesn't have service at his house. All right, he should be on here in a second, gentlemen. He's there. She's resending the link to him. I'll take my background back off now. Or
Can you hear me now?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, my phone had died. All right, we good?
Yes.
All right, sorry about that.
Okay, Mr. Trey, do you mind asking that question that you asked as soon as he left?
I was just clarifying that if it's the geo bond, we have to vote on it, and therefore they'll have to present to us exactly what they're looking for. And that may be part of that meeting that that Ken's going to have with them on Thursday. Is that kind of what that's about?
Mr. Garino?
Ken.
Oh,
Yeah, Ken.
unmute.
No, that meeting, the meeting they're wanting, the citizens group you're talking about, it's a little broader than that. I think they want to understand the whole big picture of how it operates now. But your question, yes, it would have to have 3 readings and we would have to know specifics before we went forward on that.
Vice
Okay.
Chairman Bowers.
So just for clarification, the vineyards last year purchased a piece of apparatus or something, correct? And that's the reason why they don't have money to cover and would have to take a geo bond out. Is that correct?
Yeah, they don't have enough money in their fund balance to pay for this type of equipment. And it's over on your capital sheet.
Correct, but it's because they cleared out their fund balance last year, correct?
Yeah, they didn't clear it out 100%, but they have enough to run off operational cost and get them through cash flow until their taxes start coming back in.
So they took it down, for clarification, they took their fund balance down to just the minimum required for operation last year. That's the reason why we'd have to take a geo bond out, correct?
Yes, they do not have enough in their operational budget to take on a debt service payment within their operational budget. So because they're under a millage-based system, you cannot increase your operational millage except for certain things under Act 388, which this does not fall under. Now they can increase their debt service millage rate unlimited for new debt or existing debt. So that's why we would have to go this route and issue a true geo bond to raise their millage in 2022 to pay for the debt service on it.
Vice Chairman Bowers, go ahead.
They purchased the truck last year, correct?
Well, they're wanting to purchase another one they technically, I think on the current truck, they haven't even received it yet. I think it's still on order, but this is another truck.
Correct. They wanted two last year. We did one last year. Now they're wanting another one this year, correct?
Correct.
Well,
Okay.
I'm confused, and maybe you guys can help me out. I thought they weren't going to have to do this, and that's why we jumped through the hoops to get them to get this one truck. I didn't
Well,
know
that was another truck. That was not the truck that's being proposed for 2021. They're needing another truck. Actually, they're needing two trucks for 2021, but we're only putting in the budget for one.
Councilman Whitehurst. Councilman
I
Whitehurst.
think I'm going with you. They were getting, yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I know my internet's not that great. They were donating an old truck, I think, to Dacusville to make
No.
room for this next truck. They went to someplace, but there was no mention of a second truck, is my understanding. And I wasn't sure that they didn't do a bond on that truck.
Well, if you remember, we ended up doing a bond, and I'm trying to go back in my memory. They did a bond for what y'all did for like 3 years.
Right.
And that paid for that fire truck that's in the current year budget or the previous year's budget. I'd have to get my numbers. But what we're proposing for 2021 is for an additional fire truck.
I guess my question is, actually, we did a GFS truck. They
Pardon
didn't
me?
pay for straight up cash. They did a jail bond for it. They donated a truck to somebody else. Now they want another truck?
Yeah, they actually want two, but there's only one recommended at this point. When we get to capital, you'll see there's a lot of requests for capital. And we'll talk about that on how we looked at capital and who we look to recommend the capital. Obviously, I don't have expertise in what's needed for the fire services. So we reached out to the emergency services director and along with the vehicle maintenance superintendent to look at capital.
Vice Chairman Bowers and then Councilman Hendricks.
I will, if we're going to talk about capital in more detail, I'll withhold my question until that time.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Councilman Hendricks.
One thing to keep in mind about the Vineyards community, that they support those residents up there in that fire district. They support their fire district wholeheartedly, and they have the means to do the things they're wanting to do. And also through their philanthropy, that fire truck went through Holly Springs is to where that one went, Councilman Whitehurst. And Mr. Roper, after he meets with them, I'm sure he'll be able to give us more information on more specifics on that. But based on what Councilman Byers said, I think we should wait a little bit more before we go into a little more detail on that. But do keep in mind that the community of the Vineyards, they do support their fire district in many different ways, including financially, and they can't afford that.
I understand that and have heard that loud and clear. However, I want to know what the implications are for us to continue to extend additional bonds. It seems like it's happening all the time, and we'll talk about that when we get there. Ralph Greeno, if you'll continue on.
Okay. Public Service Commission. Basically what we have in there is funding for painting at the wastewater treatment plant. This is something over time we've been saving money up for. So we have money within the Public Service Commission's fund to pay for this. I don't know the details yet on what it actually is, but basically it's a thicker seal coat that we have to put on the tank out there to extend the life, or we're going to have to look at building in the near future a new treatment plant for the Public Service Commission. But we do have money to pay for that.
Vice Chairman Bowers.
I apologize, I'm full of questions, but did we not do this 2 years ago?
I think we talked about it, but I don't think we actually did it. We set aside the money to do it.
We have, and I'm not an expert on it. We did do a painting. I don't know if it was 2 years ago. I think like it was mentioned. It was talked about, but I think probably 4 years ago we painted it, and it just didn't hold up.
I wasn't here 4 years ago.
Right.
And it wasn't 17. I'm like 90%. It was either 18 or 19. It probably was 18. We had this conversation They came in, hold
Yeah,
on,
Talked
guys.
about the paint. Yeah, I
Hold on,
remember.
guys.
yeah.
Anyway, they
You're
talked
right
about it.
about, you're right about this, Councilman Bowers. There's multiple tanks and there's multiple processes through the years where we painted them. We probably need to get back more information to y'all on that one. I don't want to misstate something because my memory's fuzzy on that.
Yeah, I'm just, because I remember Councilman Whitehurst made a great point about back then, and sorry, Trey, I'm giving you a compliment, but Councilman Whitehurst made a comment about rocking on, and due to his expertise, he understood a lot of it more than I did. But I remember we had some issues. They had to redo it. They were talking about these extra steps and 10 years and 15-year product. And we said, what's going to guarantee it and blah, blah, blah. We don't want to be doing this again in 2 years. And it feels like we're doing it again in 2 years. So I want to make sure we're not redoing the same thing.
That is exactly the question I'd like Ken Roper to look into is on this product. We were told, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, this had a 10 or 15-year warranty. And we need exactly how that was, because that's what we were sold on this thing. And we ain't need to be getting screwed on this.
Actually, that was, we did some tank painting in fiscal year 2016 and a little bit left in 2017.
I wasn't elected, wasn't sworn in until January 1st, 2017. So it was after that we had the conversation.
We did.
Yeah.
I agree. We did have the conversation about this because I remember Councilman Whitehurst talking about it, and I would agree with you. I think there was some sort of a guarantee that this new paint was going to last so much longer, and that's why we were spending the extra money for it.
It's a very expensive paint, and it's supposed to have this great warranty. And that's what we need to look at is say, what's the warranty here, and start calling it in.
Yeah, I think part of the cost is they're going to get an engineering service to manage this whole project. And
Yeah, this go around, that is one of the differences because they feel like that we've tried to do this in years past without the benefit of having, someone come in and actually project manage it from front to back. So I'll find out about the history of this and give you all a good report on that. But I do know that part of what they have saved for this time is to have somebody, an engineering firm, do project management on it to make sure that we're not creating the problem.
I have some questions about that. We're talking about painting a tank. You bring in a expert painting company, this is not your run-of-the-mill Joe Schmo with a pickup truck. The expert
you're
is
cutting
the
out
painting
there.
company. You're paying a $50,000 project.
Yeah, this is not a small town job. This is a big job. It also involves, completely draining one tank, running out of the tank next to it, and being able to time that out for the right time of the year, even. I know they talked about that.
We would expect our wastewater treatment plant manager to know all that and be able to do that. Anyway,
Vice Chairman Bowers.
I'm willing to bet if you'll go back and find the tapes from this meeting that I keep referring to, this exact conversation happened. Experts, draining tanks, prepping tanks. We're bringing in this outside guy this is all he does and all he knows. Like this exact conversation happened sometime in the last 3 years.
Either that or it's a horrible deja vu.
Exactly. Who would have thought having deja vu over a sewer?
We absolutely will get y'all back a timeline on this and some history so that we can resolve that question before you have to move forward.
Thank you. Mr. Garino.
All right, airport fund, as I talked about earlier when I started the presentation, and I think y'all are maybe aware of this, we've got some opportunity to purchase some land at the airport for the crossfield ramp. I think we're full on the hangar side or the where the main hangar is in that area. We're looking to go across the runway and develop that area. But that's money that's pretty much going to be paid from the FAA. We'll probably have to dip in about 5%, and that's about $157,000. And that's one of the items that we're looking at taking out of the general fund to pay for that cost. But here again, I don't have all the information, but that's something that I think that's been talked around with the airport director and council. But that is in the budget if council wants to pursue that. All right, so we'll talk about capital. You should have a detailed sheet that I put in your budget folder that talked about all the capital that was requested and then what is being recommended. When it comes to vehicles in the fire departments, we really relied on the vehicle maintenance superintendent along with the emergency services director to make the decision on what's needed for the fire departments, along with when it came to rolling stock, relied heavily on the vehicle maintenance superintendent. Neither Ken or I are experts in capital items such as that. So what's in there was based on those two department heads requesting it and recommending it in the department. But you'll see there's about $25 million. You have the list in there. There was things that departments requested that the superintendent didn't believe was needed. There were some things that the departments that didn't request for vehicles that the superintendent felt like was needed. So it kind of went both ways, but in the end, you can see the list of what's being recommended based on what was requested. I will say there's 2 items if you look on that, possibly 3, but that makes up the number. The interoperable radio system was in there for $8.6 million. That was one big item. And then I think they had the parking garage for the courthouse. This is something the clerk to council has brought up in the past. But that is not in the budget. That's about $2.2 million. And then economic development requested about $2 million to get the conversation going about possibly doing another commerce park for economic development. One thing that we're looking at doing is actually establishing a mill dedicated to capital funds instead of just every year kind of saying we have X number of dollars, and then if the needs arise, we take it away from capital and put it towards something else. So what we're looking at doing is taking the money that we have available for capital, which is about 1.3 mils, reducing the general fund millage by 1.3 mils to offset that increase, and truly have that on the tax bills to show that it's dedicated towards capital, that we can't use it for anything else. Anything else. But that's what we're proposing in the budget, so we can start a funding stream to start having money available to replace for capital. We had it.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Green. Vice Chairman Bowers had a question.
I actually had some line item questions that I wanted to ask about. Mr. Green wants to finish, then I'll be more happy to ask, or if he wants me to go ahead and ask. It's up to him.
I was pretty much in that end of it. I just say we just need to have a true funding stream like we did in the past, but it wasn't totally dedicated towards capital as far as putting it on the tax bill. And we've gone from 3.5 mils down to about 1.3 mils for capital, because it's just been eaten up over time for other costs. So that's all I had on capital.
I would point out before you ask that question or a series of questions, Mr. Bowers, just to reiterate that the idea here is that we're trying to build in, as you had said in your goals, it was goal 3, to have more of a plan for capital expenditures, to rely on the fleet maintenance guys, the building maintenance guys, and to plan 5 years out. And so part of that is getting the funding source uniform, the funding source solid, and then we can start a total new approach there. And so this is the first big step in that direction, I think.
I agree with that 100%. It's kind of my fault that we're in the spot we're in there. I'll leave it at that, but I agree 100%. We do need to come up with a permanent, legitimate funding source. But my line item questions. So, and I'm not picking on an individual department, agency, anything like that, in asking my questions. I know that ambulances are listed in here, and obviously that's something I know a little bit about. I also know that we had them in last year's budget, or the budget we're currently in that will end in 2 months, or 2 months. I know we're waiting on some specs back. Have we gotten the specs back? Are these numbers that are in here close to what those specs are? Or are we still waiting on those specs?
Yeah, and I'll let Ralph Kess fill in some of the background in his dual role as the purchasing manager there. But that's an issue we've dealt with all years on those ambulances. So Ralph, I don't want to get the procedural history wrong there.
Yeah, and Chris, stop me if I'm going in the wrong direction. I know in the budget at one time we had to do it for remounts. And we went through the procurement policy, bid that all out. It came in over budget, so we kind of scaled back a little bit to have the remounts done. We put in an order with a company that could stay within our budget, sent them a purchase order, and just got a call last week, and they said that because of the, I guess you would say the COVID-19, that they're not going to be able to get those cabin chassis to do the remounts on them. And he said, realistically, the salesman said, yeah, we'll be able to get it. But the vice president contacted me and said, realistically, we're not going to be able to get that for a long time. We had prepaid that in advance. So I just told the vice president just to give us our money back, and then we'll just have to go in a different direction. I'm not sure what that direction is right now because we really don't know. This just came up last week when we found out about it.
So are you using the money that from the refund as a part of this, or is this in addition to
not
that?
at all. No. This, like I said, this just came up last week when we found out we can't do the remounts. From my standpoint, I don't have a plan yet. We'll have to get with the EMS director and probably vehicle maintenance and see what direction we need to go in.
I'm almost willing to guarantee there are cabin chassis sitting on a lot somewhere waiting to be used.
Could be.
I'm almost willing to guarantee it, and I won't get into the weeds on that, but I am almost willing to guarantee that just because I know how it works. But I also know Detroit slowed down. They're making ventilators and PAPRs and everything else except for cars and trucks right now. So I get that too. As far as new cabin chassis rolling out of assembly lines, that's not happening. I guess my question is that 150,000 figure, is that in line with what a realistic quote is? Because I know previous we were at what, 2.25 last year before is what they were coming back with new trucks.
I can tell you that's what was requested, and that was what was signed off by the superintendent on what they believe the cost would be. Now, I will say those are not remounts; those are actual new ambulances.
Okay, and then my next question: SCBA's. Did we not just do a grant to replace a bunch of SCBA's?
That grant is, and we'll have to get you the details on that, but that grant is hasn't gone active yet. We're ready to apply for that grant. But the last update I got from the emergency services director is we're just waiting on it to come active in the system.
Okay. So if that grant comes active, is this money for SCBA's needed?
If I'm thinking of the same one, I believe it will not. They wanted to go ahead and put it in the budget because they weren't sure which way the grant was going to go.
Until we know we're going to get the grant, you got to make plans to do something. Okay.
That's what he's thinking.
I want to make sure I was on the right train of thought there. We have a piece of equipment that requested 250,000 and they recommended 270,000.
That is for the vineyards. That is for their fire truck. And one thing they did not take into account was if we do a GO bond, there's going to be closing cost with that to pay the attorney fees and the financial advisor's fees. So I upped that by $20,000 to take that into account.
Okay.
What are the financial implications for the county when we do GO bonds?
In what regards?
Well, I mean, so we're in essence loaning them the money, right?
No, we would be loaning the
credit.
We would be loaning I think that was 6 Mile. What did I have in there? It wouldn't be for the vineyards, but it would be for 6 Mile and Dacusville. In essence, we're loaning the money. Now we're not going to go through the legal process and put make us first lien on it or anything, because in essence it's us. But as far as the vineyards, that would be issued through a bank, and they would loan us the money versus what I'm proposing doing with 6 Mile and Dacusville, which is the county loan us the money, and then they would pay us back over time like we've done in the past on some other projects for the fire districts.
But
Mainly for
what
the fire station.
financially, what does that mean though for the county to go borrow the money for the vineyards to pay back?
I don't think we have an attorney here, but I mean, it's the full tax and.
Oh, hold on a second.
Slide on you, but.
Do we lose somebody? Did we
No,
lose
so
Chris? Hold
Chris
on,
Gump.
we lost Chris.
Yeah, I think we lost Chris.
Okay, you're all on mute again. Oh, not yet, you will be.
No music.
Carl's rolling his eyes.
Mr. Chairman. Roy Costner. Mr. Chairman, Roy. Shit, come on. Roy. Hello?
Hey, Trey, I can hear you.
I'm trying to get Roy on that. I don't know if he's gotten in touch with Chris or not.
Yeah, I'm trying to find out right now.
Roy, has Chris gotten in touch with you? Roy.
Mr. Bowers,
I can't see if you can see me or not.
yes, you're
Okay.
much brighter now.
Yeah.
Can you see everything? Vice
No.
Chair, can you see everybody? Can you see enough to continue or no?
Yeah, we'll try it.
Are you on your phone?
I am.
Turn your phone
I'll-
sideways.
I don't want to. Then I can't see everything.
Oh, you can't?
Can you see me now?
Yeah. No, we can see you fine. It looks good. It's actually, yeah, it looks fine.
Well, we'll do this until it dies.
Don't- All right, well, let me make sure we got everybody back on board. Mr. Guarino's here, Mr. Roper, Mr. Whitehurst. Okay. All I saw was a hand. Okay, Mr. Whitehurst, everybody's back on board. All right, we'll start back over. Mr. Guarino, I was asking you specifically about, I guess what I was getting at in my question on GeoBond, when we as a county borrow or for somebody else, we issue it, we go in and get GeoBond, it goes against how much we can actually borrow. In other words, we've already got a big one out that we can't just borrow it to infinity. There's got to be a limit.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. When it comes to this for a special purpose district, it does not go against our debt limit.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, okay. As far as, you know, when we sign these GeoBond documents, we do say that that we will raise the millage to pay it back. So I didn't know if you're going that route, or in this case, you're talking about the debt limit. It has no
Right.
effect on our debt limit at all when we issue GeoBonds
All right,
for
okay.
special tax districts.
All right, Councilman Hudson, you had a question?
Yes, about the fire trucks. We're not raising the fire fees this year.
Correct.
However, we're loaning fire districts money, large amounts for fire trucks. Now, next year, the fire fees will have to go up, won't they?
No, not for the 6 Mile in Dacusville. They have enough in their operational budget, and I've already accounted for it in the budget to pay us back the debt service. Now, the GEO bond for the vineyards, that will have to go up. The millage rate will have to go up in 2022 when the first payment comes due. But issuing these GEO bonds, as you know, it can take a while. So generally, if we got done by the end of December, generally the first payment we wouldn't probably have until the following December, which will be in the next.
So they have enough in their operating funds to buy a fire truck that's left over.
The Dacusville and 6 Mile have enough money in their budget to pay us back over time, to pay us back the loan for the principal amount and the interest amount. They do not have enough money in their fund balance to pay for it. That's why they're going to get a loan from us. In the past, we have done GEO bonds for certain things, for fire districts, and for sometimes operational cost in the general fund. But I've heard council talk about they would prefer not to issue GEO bonds when they don't have to. So we've got enough money in general fund, it's around $30 million, 24 of that's available, that we can loan them the money and earn a little bit of interest off of it. We've done this in the past for Croswell's Fire Station, I think Liberty, and maybe 6 Mile and one other one off the top of my head.
So the Emergency Services Board has already vetted this.
Not that Ken, I'll let you expand on that.
Yeah, that and more. The question we asked in the budget processes was, and we asked this of the emergency services director, is this consistent with the fire plan that the emergency services board did here a little over a year ago? So a little over, I guess, a year and a half ago. So that was one of the questions. Was it consistent? And then was it recommended by, vehicle maintenance as well? So it went through a couple of different hoops to get here. And we've included it here because we know that in the case of the vineyards, that they really strongly want it.
Vice Chairman Bowers.
So if the Emergency Services Board has vetted all of this, vehicle maintenance has vetted all of this. So you're telling me that the Vineyards has a truck that is in worse condition than any other fire truck in the county and really needs to be replaced?
No,
is that what I'm hearing?
No, I would not. I'm not telling you that. I would love for that to be the standard. That's the standard y'all advocated for down here, Unified Emergency Services. What this would tell you is that the Vineyards,
really wants it.
Really wants it.
But it doesn't meet the fire plan. Vehicle maintenance doesn't think they need them. So the Emergency Services Board just signed up on it because?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all, and I apologize for that. Is that what will happen with these trucks when they'll get a new one at the Vineyards? Someone else will see that upgrade somewhere else in the service area, in the different service areas. So we've looked at it. I think it was Holly Springs. I think Councilman Hendricks mentioned that. That's what you'll see. So will it be in the best interest of the county services as a whole? Yes, it would be, because some other entities able to get a truck. But what I would love to be able to tell you, but what we can't tell you yet, is that under an advanced or a unified emergency services plan, that it is the biggest need in the county-wide. But we're not there. We're still at 13 individual decisions.
So back to the chairman's point, this GEO bond won't have any implications on the county. It will just have implications on the Vineyards Fire District?
That's correct. I can speak for that.
Okay. So if I could just for that whole back to Emergency Services Board, et cetera, county fire plan, we talked about recently, I don't remember when, it's been the last month though, maybe two, of how the unification and purchasing and blah, blah, blah for the fire board and fire districts. The Genesis E-Force extrication tools, is that the equipment that's being used across the county? So it's interchangeable everywhere? Or is that some departments are using Hearst, some are using Home Ultra, some are using Genesis being used across the county? So it's interchangeable.
If, for what I know about it, I'm not, I don't really know a lot about it. We still have a lot of different name brands throughout the county within the fire districts.
So that's really probably a question for Mr. Roper. And the reason I even bring it up, and I'm not against, I could care less what you use, but if at some point we're going to look at having the same equipment across the county, at what point do we say this is the day we're going to start buying the same equipment for across the county?
Yeah, so we that day is here, depending on what type of equipment you're asking for. So we did have 13 different districts buying 13 different kinds of, I'm going to be obtuse here, but 13 different kinds of toothbrushes and toilet paper. And so one thing that Ralph has been good about is looking for right now those things that we could do to make it uniform, where we're handling the purchasing of, for example, uniforms from a central location. We're doing that through purchasing instead of having everybody buy their own uniforms. Now we're coming up with a standard amount and we're buying them through here. We're easing into those kind of changes because, quite frankly, we couldn't start addressing the fire fees and the millage rates like we had tried to build up into in this budget. We've got, for example, in Easley Rural, you've got a fire fee for $80 unless you've got a chicken coop, in which case it's $81. And I don't know how much revenue that raises for Easley Rural, but probably not much. A lot of these things need to be adjusted, and we were coming up with a plan for that. But to keep consistent with y'all's direction that you didn't want to change any of that during COVID, we kind of put that on the shelf for now.
I guess the reason I'm asking, when we're talking about $30,000, I also saw a pickup truck in here for $30,000. if one, and let's be obtuse of whatever, it's 8:30
Yes,
at night.
thank you. Yes.
Obtuse, thank you. If let's say the Public Service Commission said, well, I want a Ford truck, because we've always had Fords, and we'll say the recycle centers, whatever department that falls under, because I'm struggling, says, well, I've always driven Chevrolets. At what point do you say, this is what we're going to buy because this is what it makes sense to have the same of, and from this day forward, that's what we're going to work on?
What I would say there is, because you and I are completely philosophically aligned on this. At what point do we say that? We say that at every chance we get from now going forward. So there shouldn't be any Chevy Ford debates going on. And when we find them, we need to stop them.
And that's what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah.
I could care less what brand you buy, but at some point we got to start standardizing.
Agree.
I agree. I've been seeing it for 20 years now, trying to have some type of uniformity, especially on the fire districts.
What I would say is this council has finally given us the tools to do that. And so we can start making progress with that, with the action y'all took last spring to consolidate the governance structure of the fire boards.
Any other questions, or are you going to keep going?
Yes.
So can we look at that? I guess that's my question is, can we actually look at that?
Yeah, we will, and we can come back and show you examples of where we've combined it and show you examples of where maybe we didn't, so that you can look more closely at that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Garino.
Okay, debt service fund, and I think I got about one or two more slides. Debt service fund, I think we've pretty much already covered this in the previous discussion, but issue a GO bond for the Vineyards fire equipment, millage increase in 2022. Vineyards operational budget does not have the capacity for debt service. And under Act 388, millage can only be increased by the population and CPI. There are exceptions out there, one being for debt service. So we can't just increase their operational millage to pay for this. Even if we did, it's still a tax increase, but we can't go that route and just get a loan and loan them the money like we're looking at doing for 6 Mile and Dacusville. We would actually have to issue debt to be the exception for debt service. So that's why we're having to go that route. It's completely comes to a legal issue, and it all falls up under Act 388 when they changed that several years ago about being able to increase your millage.
So can they afford it? I mean, I know they can afford it, but can they afford it? If they don't have the capacity for the debt service, can they afford it?
Well, they can afford it by, in 2022, increasing their millage. That's the workaround. The emergency service director said this, I don't even know what the piece of equipment is, but the emergency service director said that piece of equipment does need to be replaced in 2021. So this is a workaround on how they can pay for it, but it will cost an increase in taxes just for the fire district in 2022, not 2021.
So if we approve it, we're actually increasing taxes for the Vineyards in next year, not this year.
In 2022, correct. Not for 2021.
Any other questions?
That was my point with the other fire districts. I mean, you buy a $570,000 truck and a $50,000 chief's vehicle. I don't see how in the world they're going to pay that back without increasing the fire fee.
Which one is
that's not in their regular operating budget? I don't know how they pay that back without increasing the fire fee. And
Which
so
one is it?
We didn't put the chief's vehicle in here.
Yeah, that's what I was
Okay,
looking for.
okay.
Councilman Whitehurst.
We went through the same thing last time we had this discussion. What they're going to be doing is giving us their older trucks. So we're basically subsidizing the disbursement of trucks to the rest county fire districts. If we do with them what we did last time, get their people to vote on it, or they did this survey to find out who was interested in paying more taxes. If they want to pay more taxes to get a truck, we shouldn't be stopping them to do that if we're going to get a free truck for the county anyway.
I agree with that statement 100%, Councilman Whitehurst.
Let me ask you a question though. while I kind of agree with that too. However, so all the other districts are going to continue to get hand-me-down trucks and not get the bright new shiny truck like they want.
It's not to say they can't get bright new shiny trucks. We got free trucks coming to them. Okay, whether we want them or not, we could sell them for that matter, but they're donating a truck to the county.
True.
Sell it, that's fine. It's basically a windfall for the county that those taxpayers are willing to give us.
Vice Chairman Bowers.
What it all really comes down to, until you go to a countywide millage where everybody's paying the same, this is what it is. And that's all there is to it. Until you go to a countywide millage system, the Vineyards is willing to do it, want to do it, and Councilman Hurst is 100% correct. Is it right? Is it wrong? That's not really up to debate. It's whether or not at some point we're going to actually have that tough conversation. Obviously, this year is not the year we're going to have it. I don't think you have an option on this. It goes against what we've said for the last 3 years, what the goals and visions are. That's my only issue with it. It literally goes against what our goals and visions are.
Yeah, that's why I keep waving this thing. I agree completely.
Councilman Hendricks.
One thing about this with the Vineyards, and I have a pretty good pulse on that community, having met with them several times, is for the big picture as far as equipment, yes, it does align with the goals. However, with the millage thing, there is a difference or discrepancy there. But as Councilman Whitehurst said, that community is willing to fork out the extra money to help out another district that can't afford it, especially during this tough time where the money is limited. This is a win-win for the Vineyards and also the benefactoring fire district. So both, there's going to be some win-wins in this.
I do see it as a win-win right now, but I see Vice Chairman Bowers' point in that at some point, how do you're creating haves and have-nots. At some point, how do you have a unified system across the county to where right now we've got some districts that are paying a lot more than other districts. We've got people who have trailers that are paying $156 and people that have houses that are paying $40. So, Vice Chairman Bowers.
It's very short-minded to think that it's a win-win, because it is in the short game a win-win. Emergency services is not a money-making business, never has been, which is one reason why it's so frustrating in the budget, because it is a loss. Unfortunately, it is a necessary evil, unless you want to go places like in Tennessee where you have to prescribe to the fire department. And if you don't prescribe to them, they just don't show up. Your house is going to burn, because then it becomes an option. We don't do that in Pickens County. Regardless of your ability to pay, we don't check to see if your name's on the roll or roster before we send the fire engine out there, which is the right way to do it. Places like Holly Springs, there's a reason, and this is a very sensitive subject, but I'm going to bring it up. They shut down an elementary school in Holly Springs because that area is not growing. They could not support a school in Holly Springs. What makes you think Holly Springs Fire Department is any different? If that area is not growing, their tax base is not growing. It's actually shrinking. How in God's name are you going to continue to provide coverage in areas like that? And that's not what this conversation is about, but I just feel like I have to say it. How are you going to continue if you say if you can't pay for it, you can't buy it, but Vineyards right down the road can? I appreciate the folks at the Vineyards. I've got friends that live in the Vineyards. I'm not against the Vineyards at all. But when you look at it as we're going to do for the departments that can, you also have to be able to do for the departments that cannot. And until we find a way to fund those areas that cannot, this is going to be an ever repeating conversation. And I think that's where my frustration is, because for 3 years now, we've had this exact same conversation with no progress.
And if I'm going to just say, and hopefully this helps out, is if you remember, I think it was 2 years ago, we didn't propose any capital for fire districts because we wanted to look at having a uniform revenue stream. So we didn't want to give certain fire departments a loan, or whether it's geo debt or whatever, because that was going to go ahead and get them the fire truck. And if council decided to have a uniform revenue stream where we didn't have all these individual ones, then they're going to get their fire truck, and everybody else is going to pay for that fire truck when you go to uniform revenue. We went through that, and then council, wanted to have more time to look at it. And so we've decided until council wants to change anything and go to uniform revenues, we gotta have some of this fire equipment. We can't keep putting it on hold. And this is one of the items that the emergency services director said is needed. But yes,
I
if
get that.
council ever goes down the road of having uniform revenue stream, then in this situation, I don't want to say the vineyards will win, but they'll end up getting a fire truck when everybody will still have to pay for that debt service for the next how many ever years, 7, 8, 10 years. So I understand what Councilman Bowers is talking about. And we looked at this 2-3 years ago, as he mentioned.
So it's a horrible chicken and egg problem as to when to jump in to try to solve
Exactly.
this and make everybody happy.
Exactly.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate the debate, everybody.
Now we'll get to the value of a mill. I think I got 2 more slides. So just to
You
kind of
said
give you,
that 2 slides ago. You said that 2 slides ago.
I apologize. I'm close. I'll put it that way. You could already sneak peek and look at my presentation on where I'm at. But as far as value of a mill, this is coming from the assessor's office, and we've gone conservative. We've still got some values that are not in these numbers. And it's simply because we're behind with not having appraisers on staff. We've had one position, I think, that's been open for a year. We've had another position that's been open for 6 months. So these numbers in theory should increase in time. It's just a matter of when, but this is the latest numbers we've had to be able to put in the budget to estimate our revenues for 2021. You can see general fund, bonds, capital fund, it's going up about 1.1%. Everything's going up about 1.1% until you get down to the vineyards and the springs. And you're probably wondering, why is it going down? A lot of times what's happening is at one time, these were vacation homes. Still may be, but a lot of people are signing up for owner occupied, which puts them at 4% versus 6%. So they're seeing the values of the mill actually going down.
How is that
Chairman Bowers, yeah.
how's that affecting their operational budget?
Well, I mean, it's, you're talking $200 for the vineyards per value of a mill, and they may have 40 mills, I think it is, or don't hold me to it. I've got it on the next sheet. But it has an effect. It doesn't have a drastic effect. We're not talking about significant money, but what you can see is the revenues aren't growing, or the value of a mill is not growing. And that may just be more if people are deciding to live here versus having to be their second home, because the taxes are higher when it's a second home versus an owner occupied home. But I just want to show you what the value was in 2020 versus what we're estimating for 2021. As I said, this number will change. Nothing's concrete about these numbers. Every day things change when it comes to values. People sign up for, like I said, they're on 4%, goes to 6%. They sell their home. Someone uses it as a vacation home and vice versa. So I just don't want y'all to think, and that goes back to Councilman Bowers about the library. Yeah, we go based on what we have at the time when we put the budget together. Things can change and we can collect more money than what we had anticipated. But you got to look at it at a certain point and go from there. And then the millage rates, everything's staying the same except for what I talked about earlier. We don't have to do that, but we can decrease the general fund mill, and that's what we're proposing by 1.3 mills. And then, and I've got a typo in there, and I apologize for that. But the capital fund will increase by 1.3 mills. The offset is 0. And all the other funds will that we have millage on will stay the same. So that's my last slide, is next steps. I think we've kind of gone over what the duties are of the administrator. Hopefully we've answered a lot of questions. I know there's still questions out there, but really it's up to council on the next steps on how they'd like to proceed with the budget.
So if y'all correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that last year what we did was individually we came up with those things for our, the constituents that we represent, and put those in, created a list to deliver to the county administrator. And then that list was then published out to all of us before the next meeting. If you guys don't mind doing that, The other thing that I wanted to mention, because I do want to wrap us up unless anybody has something that's burning on their heart right now that they want to say. But I do want to say that now that the governor is beginning to open up different places throughout the state, I'd like to make the suggestion that our next meeting, if you gentlemen are willing and able, that you would come here. We still can't gather in groups of 10 or more, so we'll still have to do our public hearing and public forum the same way that we had published it. But I'd like to, we'll work on rearranging some tables in here so we can do the social distancing. But I'd like to propose that we try to get back together. I miss seeing you guys instead of looking like the Brady Bunch. Does anybody have anything else? Councilman Hendricks, you wanted to add something? He's muted. Unmute. Hold on, Councilman Hendricks. Okay, now.
One thing I would like to point out, and this is not necessarily budget related, but it is Pickens County related, and that is I toured the Laurel and Hardy Lake Road community last Friday, and asked the people within the county keep that group in their prayers. Right now, they have plenty of help, a lot of supplies coming in. However, in a couple of weeks, when the disaster relief teams leave and the supplies start dwindling down, those folks are still going to need help. And asked that in your communities that in a couple of weeks, did you guys reach out? I also want to commend Chief Shane Walton with the Pumpkintown Fire Department. He's done a tremendous job. He's in with that community. He's been up there a tremendous amount, as well as our other employees within the county. But Chief Walton has done an outstanding job up there in that community. And I encourage you guys, if you haven't been, to go tour it, arrange it with Chief Walton to see firsthand. And it's heartbreaking. It'll wear you out to think about that. And please continue to pray for this community.
Well, Councilman Hendricks, I couldn't agree with you more. The power of prayer is something that I think that we all need to do for our county and for those communities that have been affected. Vice Chairman Bowers, you wanted to say something?
Absolutely. I kind of want to echo what Councilman Hendricks said. I want to gratitude to all the team members from all the different agencies throughout the county, working well together with municipalities and even with Oconee County and what's going on there. It has been very awesome to see. I actually was out and about right after the storm and saw the damage here locally and easily and everybody out working and so on and so forth. But with that, I don't want an answer right now. Do have some concern. There's a lot of storm debris out there. I mean, a lot of storm debris that I know is getting hauled off to the landfill. I know our roads and bridges guys have worked overtime. I know our EMS and fire guys have worked nonstop. Can, at some point, Mr. Roper work on getting us, since we're talking about budget. Yeah, since we're talking about budget, do we have contingencies for that stuff? What's the overall cost, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Okay. Instead of continuing discussion, it looks like Mr. Feemster's phone has finally died.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
There we go. Motion to adjourn. Second by Councilman Hendricks. All those in favor? Trey, let me see your hand. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll see you next.